President Biden is en route to Alaska. He's the first U.S. president to commemorate that tragic day away from the White House or the sites of the attacks. Alexandria Hoff is live at the White House. Alexandria, the president making his way back from an overseas trip.
Yeah, and it's going to take quite some time, Dana. And you know, with each passing year, there is greater concern about infamy fading. 2 years ago, President Biden visited all 3 crash sites. Last year, he delivered remarks at the Pentagon. And this year is the first time that a president is not on U.S. soil, as those names are read in New York City. Well, once in Anchorage, President Biden is going to deliver remarks and meet with more than 1,000 service members, first responders, and their families.
He plans to honor the lives lost and the families and loved ones who still feel the pain of the terrible day. This is something he feels is very important to do. We can only imagine the heartbreak and the pain that the 9/11 families have felt every day for the past 22 years.
But, you know, it's unclear if the president will meet with anyone who was personally impacted or who lost loved ones in the September 11th attacks. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Donald Arias, he lost his brother and feels that maybe President Biden being at a distance is for the best.
Quite frankly, I prefer he stay away anyway. We'll be spared one of his stories of how he can relate, like he did with the people in Lahaina, how he can relate because of a kitchen fire that singed his cat's whiskers. We can do without that.
So in the president's absence, as Eric mentioned, Vice President Harris is attending the commemoration in New York City right now. First Lady Jill Biden will lay a wreath at the 9/11 Pentagon Memorial later this afternoon. And First Gentleman Doug Emhoff, he is headed to Shanksville. He will also lay a wreath at the Flight 93 Memorial.
An impact on the skyline of New York. What is it like as you see it now?
It's like a whole different skyline. It's like a whole different city and world. I cannot believe the site of Lower Manhattan without the World Trade Center, and therefore we have to rebuild, not necessarily in that form, but we have to rebuild at least as good and maybe better.
Today is Monday, September 11th, 2023. It is the 22nd anniversary of the attacks on September 11th. Will we ever actually know the truth about what happened that day? We certainly live in the destructive aftermath of what our vicious leaders decided to do with our American unity in the wake of this tragedy. Let's explore in today's show. Joe Biden will be spending September 11th in Alaska, because that's totally where the terrorist attacks happened, and America's Mayor Rudy Giuliani joins our show. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. We're going to talk a lot about government overreach, about warrantless surveillance, and the security state that was engorged and utterly decimated our Constitution in the aftermath of September 11th today, and some of the ways that our powerful leaders took advantage of a nation in mourning and a national emergency. But ladies and gentlemen, if you are sick of being listened to via your social media devices, I encourage you to join me in using Silent. Silent is the sleeve that I put my cell phone in when I wish for absolute privacy. Of course, you've had those creepy moments where you're talking about something and your cell phone suddenly starts serving you an ad about that exact thing. That's because it's always listening. And not just one app, but bunches of apps. And if your apps can listen, if Amazon can listen, then who else can listen to you via your phone? So, ladies and gentlemen, please go consider using Silent for protection today. Silent is a light, portable, Verde sleeve for your mobile device that protects your privacy, security, and health. It's a patented silent pocket with Faraday technology that blots harmful radiation and all wireless signals, giving you peace of mind that your personal data never ends up in the wrong hands. Go to Silent today, slnt.com/Benny, slnt.com/Benny, and save 15% with free shipping on qualified orders. I certainly use this every single evening and every single night and every single time that I wish for some privacy, which is, quite frankly, a lot these days. So, in the aftermath of September 11th, we have a lot to talk about today. Things went wrong. Things have gone horribly wrong. You could argue that this is perhaps the beginning of the end of the American empire, September 11th. And there's so much to discuss, and there's so many ways that we were used as a nation, and our goodwill and our fighting spirit was manipulated in that time. And will we ever actually know the truth about what happened? We'll cover on today's show the CIA's involvement. Why are these hijackers allowed into America in the first place? Well, some FBI documents reveal exactly the dark truth about what was truly going on. The Saudi connection to September 11th, how you've been lied to by your federal government for so long. But that doesn't take away from one inexplicable fact, which is that you and I witnessed the systematic murder of thousands of Americans on that day. And we wish to remember those individuals. Now, so many people say never forget, and we certainly say that on this show. But the question remains for us today, living, how do we not forget these people who were killed on that day? Not killed, murdered. Murdered on that day. What is the best way to actually remember these individuals? And what led to their murder? The planes flew into the building. It was obviously an act of extraordinary evil, the likes of which none of us have ever seen and maybe will never see ever again. Hopefully. But what are the circumstances that led to that event, that terror event? There were so many systematic failures and so much that you don't know and that I don't know and that none of us knew when we watched this happen. I watched it happen when I was a freshman in high school. You know, one of those giant TV screens that they wheeled in to the classrooms. Where were you? It's a moment that you'll never forget. I mean, in that regard, never forget is truly real. Let me know in the comment section. Where were you when you watched the planes hit the towers? And we don't want to forget, ladies and gentlemen, that day, of course, showed the very best of America. While it did indeed expose some of the evil that the people who run this country are capable of, it showed the very best of you and I, as evidenced by some of the people who are working there inside of the towers. I want to put up an image of Rick Rescorla. Rick Rescorla is a Vietnam veteran who was working as the vice president of security for Morgan Stanley in the South Tower, the World Trade Center, on the morning of September 11th. In the months leading up to the attack, like many Americans, Rescorla sensed something was wrong, that something would happen, that something evil was about to take place. He didn't know what, so he prepared a plan. On the day of the attack, when the first plane hit, Rescorla ordered everyone out of the building, ignoring the Port Authority order to stay put. Remember this. There was an order to shelter in place inside of the tower, to stay in your offices. That was what the Port Authority said. Sort of echoes that order to remain in Lahaina in Maui as the fires raged. You remember they closed down the roads to Lahaina, trapping people inside of the town in Maui. We've been covering Maui very closely. You see a trend, and you will begin to see a trend on this program, and you'll see a trend today, which is that the government is lying to you about very bad decisions, whether they are malevolent or whether it's just pure incompetence that leads to horrible tragedy. The government is lying to you. Rick Rescorla said, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I know the government lies. F that. Piss off, you son of a bee, he said. And he ordered people out of the building. He began to help people get out of those doomed towers. Everything above where that plane is hit is going to collapse. It's going to take down the whole building. I'm getting people the F out, he said on a radio transmission. The last time Rescorla was ever seen was on the 10th floor of the South Tower, going up to save people, and he saved over 2,700 people that day. Rick's order to evacuate the building makes him an American hero. Rick knew something was wrong. Rick knew something bad was about to happen. Rick's not the only one. In the lead up to September 11th, the forces inside of our own federal government knew that something horrible was about to happen. Did they have the power to stop it? More importantly, did they turn a blind eye to the evil that was to come? In the year before September 11th, Donald Trump published a book saying that some horrible tragedy was going to take place at the World Trade Center and they would blame Osama bin Laden for it. I mean, these things are stranger than fiction. So it's worth actually going back and reading and noting, going to the press that hates Donald Trump and watching their bewilderment at such a correct prediction. How could Trump have known such a thing? Watch.
BuzzFeed dug up an old quote from Donald Trump talking about a large-scale terror attack 19 months before 9/11. In his 2000 book, The America We Deserve, Trump wrote, "I really am convinced we're in danger of the sort of terrorist attacks that will make the bombing of the 1993 Trade Center look like little kids playing with firecrackers." Trump also mentioned the mastermind of the attack, writing, quote, "One day, we're told that a shadowy figure with no fixed address named Osama bin Laden is public enemy number one, and U.S. jet fighters lay waste to his camp in Afghanistan. He escapes back under some rock, and a few news cycles later, it's on to a new enemy and a new crisis." Trump.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. Is this really Trump before 9/11? Have you read this?
2000 in his book.
Are we making this? Somebody, did you make this up, Mika?
Nick.
I did.
Did you make this up?
Yeah,
Nick,
exactly.
tell us it's over, right? Because
Will you
you're wrong
stop?
about everything.
Mika, stop. God.
I don't think it's over.
What's that? What's the rage here? Will you stop
No,
picking
it's
on
cute.
him?
I think it's cute.
Well,
go for it.
No, really quickly, though. I mean, so, Willie, that was
2000.
2000.
In a book he wrote in the year 2000. Yeah.
Well, it was published in 2000. He could have written in 1999 for all we know.
Exactly. He might
But
have
he-
been a bit more precious.
So he basically predicted the attacks from.
How could Donald Trump have predicted the attacks on September 11th? Let's fast forward to September 10th, the day before September 11th, 2001. Donald Rumsfeld was in charge of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld had just admitted that the Pentagon had lost track of trillions of dollars. The Pentagon itself was an organization that couldn't even communicate within its own walls. Watch.
We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions. We cannot share information from floor to floor in this building because it's stored on dozens of different technological systems that are inaccessible or incompatible.
Very strange. I always found it very strange that immediately after the attack on the Pentagon, all of the footage which is surrounding that building, I mean, and by the way, have you ever been to Washington, D.C.? You will never find a greater security state than Northern Virginia. The number of cameras around that area are voluminous, and Judicial Watch had to sue in order to get the actual footage of the attack on the Pentagon. Why would it require the lawsuit in order to get the footage of the attack? Listen, skeptics can't be wrong. You just have to ask that question. Wouldn't you, if you're going to say never forget, and we can put up the tweet here from Tom Fitton, just so that everyone can see, we're going to, listen, I have a rule here. We've been talking like for 24 hours how to do this show. We have a rule here, which is that skepticism isn't wrong. You can ask questions, but you better bring receipts. If you're gonna do a show asking questions about the most tragic day, arguably in American history, based on the consequences of this day, well, then you better be able to have some real, firm evidence about what went wrong and why. And so Tom Fitton tweeting this morning, in order to help address 9/11 conspiracy theories, we had to sue the government for the parking camera footage to catch the attack on the Pentagon. Why? Why wouldn't you be open about something like that? There are plenty of I don't even want to call them a conspiracy. It's like there's plenty of theories out there. There's no shortage of theories. Of course, that's going to be natural. There's no shortage of theories about the moon landings. But truth is stranger than fiction when you actually dig into the government actions. The government action. So we don't even need to jump into theories about September 11th to ask questions about the immediate response and reactions. Like, for instance, the government lying to us and holding back security footage of this attack on Washington, D.C. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 15 years. I certainly didn't want something horrible to happen to my family. The Pentagon was very close to where I lived. I would really want to see all angles of I would want to see all angles, everything. Like, lay it out for the American people. Look, here's what evil looks like. Look at this horrible thing. Why does it take a lawsuit to get this footage? Don't make no sense. But that's certainly not the first time that the government tried to lie or to cover up around September 11th. We deserve better. Rick Rescola, who lost his life along with so many others, thousands of America, he deserves better. We all deserve better. Because everyone in that moment united, and everyone says, wow, United America, we want that back. Wouldn't that be great to have the America we had after September 11th? September 12th, we were all one nation again. What did our leaders do with that political capital? Did they did they build the wall? Did they shut down our porous immigration system? Did they ensure that a person that intends America harm will never again step foot on this nation? Did they take the money that they would print afterwards and use it to defend the American homeland, since this was an attack on our homeland? Did they build the wall? You know the answer to that question. Vivek Ramaswamy is running for president. He's approximately my age. And he was raised, of course, in a post-9/11 world. We were young. We couldn't vote when we witnessed September 11th happening, millennials, by and large. And it profoundly affected us, obviously. I have buddies who went and signed up for the military. I have family members who fought in both theaters of war, Iraq and Afghanistan. Some of those family members will never be the same after they returned, but thank God they returned. 10,000 Americans didn't return from those theaters that we know of. It changed our country forever. Vivek Ramaswamy asked this simple question, which is, why did the government lie to us about Saudi Arabia's involvement in September 11th that we now know to be true? He asked this on national television, and man, he caught a load of hell for this question. We're going to dive into it. You deserve to know the truth. Watch.
9/11 inside job or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not. Do I believe the 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not.
I mean, Vic, I think people look at those comments. They look at what you said in the Atlantic, which you say you were misquoted. They look at comments that you've made about the Federal Reserve adding zeros to media companies' bank accounts. And, I mean, it looks like you're floating conspiracy theories with this defense of, I'm just asking questions.
Well, when you actually quote me, those are my words, and I stand by them. So somebody else quoting me, putting words in my mouth, I have a problem with. But those words I stand by. You want to know why? Because we literally know the FBI, the 9/11 Commission, the U.S. government on down, told us specifically that Saudi Arabia had no involvement. 20-plus years later, quietly declassifying documents showing that not only did Saudi Arabia have involvement, it was a Saudi intelligence agent that received two of those terrorists that crashed planes on 9/11, killing Americans.
But the question was, is 9/11 an inside job? And you didn't say no.
What's that about? What do you mean? That the Saudi government accepted, and not only that, paid for the rent of the 9/11 hijackers. What do you mean by that? Let's let Vivek explain, and more importantly, let's do the research for ourselves, because we have some breaking information on exactly what the Saudi government, with the assistance of the CIA, did in order to not only encourage and invite those hijackers into our country, but also to set them up. First off, let's let Vivek explain himself. Go.
A report in the Atlantic that you gave an interview to, you said, quote, "I think it is legitimate to say how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. Maybe the answer is zero. It probably is zero for all I know, right? I have no reason to think it was anything other than zero. But if we're doing a comprehensive assessment of what happened on 9/11, we have a 9/11 commission. Absolutely, there should be an answer the public knows the answer to." Explain to me what you meant there.
This is really, it's funny. I mean, the Atlantic is playing the same game as CNN. It's funny. What I said is, on January 6th, I do believe that there were many federal agents in the field, and we deserve to know who they are. On 9/11, what I've said is that the government lied. And this is incontrovertible evidence, Caitlin. The government lied about Saudi Arabia's involvement. There was a Saudi spy named al-Bayoumi who they lied, and the government lied, and the 9/11 Commission lied. We know that because declassified reports in 2021 revealed that al-Bayoumi was indeed. What's that?
Yeah, the report that the President Biden declassified.
Yes.
But your quote here, are you telling me that the quote is wrong
20 years later,
here?
yeah.
But are you telling me that your quote is wrong here because it says how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers?
Yeah, when I actually, and this is just lifting the curtain on how media works again, I asked that reporter to send the recording because it was on the record. He refused to do it.
So if you're going to say never forget, well, then let's not forget. Let's not forget that the government lied to us about how September 11th actually happened. Now, we're going to do our best to stick directly to the known facts that come directly 22 years later, from the investigators in the aftermath of September 11th. We're going to rely specifically on a FBI and DHS agent who put his shoulder into the work, went down to Guantanamo Bay, interviewed the terrorists, and interviewed the Saudi nationals who are effectively helping them, and we're going to show you those findings. Nobody really, you can see there on CNN, nobody takes the time to actually look into this stuff. But it's worth looking into. If you're going to say never forget, well, that means that you're going to have to assume that somebody made massive mistakes to allow terrorists into our country. Who were those people? Have they been held accountable? Are they in prison? Have they been executed? Oh, okay, let's go. From NPR. We always show you our sources. Biden declassified secret FBI report detailing Saudi nationals' connections to September 11th. Okay. We're not going to read NPR here. We're going to go over to the actual report itself. We're going to go over to organizations that are not state-funded and that don't try to wash over these reports. Ladies and gentlemen, jump over to the gray zone here. Bombshell filing, 9/11 hijackers were CIA recruits. Well, that's more of a accurate headline if you are to read the actual report, and that's what we read. 9/11 hijackers were CIA recruits. Okay. How do they get there? At least 2 9/11 hijackers have been recruited in a joint CIA-Saudi intelligence operations covered up at the highest level, according to explosive new filing, and left out of the 9/11 Commission. Well, hot damn. A 21-page filing by our own government, by a special agent named Don Castriano, who is the lead investigator for the Office of Military Commissions, the legal body overseeing the cases of 9/11 defendants, summarizes classified government discovery disclosures and private interviews conducted with anonymous high-ranking CIA and FBI officials. Many agents who spoke to Castriano headed up Operation Encore, the Bureau's aborted long-running probe into the Saudi government's connection of 9/11 attack. And what did they find? Ooh, baby. Let's hop over to the actual report, because it's worth you seeing it in black and white. Here's the actual physical report. It is available for you to read. We encourage you to read it. Please Please read it. This comes directly from Don Castriano. Let's go ahead and do a quick introduction for who this man is. Don Castriano is an investigator for the Office of Military Commissions. This is the office that was set up in Guantanamo Bay in order to investigate how the 9/11 hijackers did their work. He's been a Drug Enforcement Administration agent for 21 years. He was a DEA special agent, interviewing numerous suspects and witnesses. Information developed during these interviews furthered investigations under my purview, led to seizures and arrests, and the disruption of terror networks. Testimony I have provided has been accepted by both federal and state courts as accurate and trustworthy and contributed to numerous convictions. I have not included each and every fact known to me in this declaration. Therefore, he is establishing that he is obviously a very trusted and known government entity who does professional interviews. Ladies and gentlemen, what he found in this report, and I will read to you directly from it, but what he finds in this report is that the CIA, which is a clandestine agency, not allowed to conduct operations on American soil, that the CIA, hand in glove with the Saudi government, allowed, and dare I say, welcomed and supported and paid for the September 11th hijackers to at least two of them, I want to be very specific here, to come into our nation, to go to flight school, so that they could spy on them and try to disrupt their terror network. They know who did it. They know the names of the people who did it. Bayoumi is the name of the Saudi government agent that was in operational coordination with the Central Intelligence Agency that welcomed in two of the September 11th hijackers into America. They paid their rent. They put them up. Now, again, was the CIA doing this so that September 11th could happen? I don't know. You asked the question. I'm giving you the facts directly from our federal government's findings. Is it malevolence or is it utter incompetence that leads to tragedy? The questions you must perpetually ask of our government. Here we go. Let's read from the report. During June of 2021, I interviewed confidential human source. You're going to see a lot of this CS23. This is government shorthand for confidential sources within the FBI and CIA. Okay? This person is familiar with the FBI investigations of the September 11th attacks. They stated that the FBI conducted counterintelligence investigations into the activities of Omar al-Bayoumi. Prior to September 11th, the FBI officials in the San Diego field office suspected that he was operating as an intelligence officer. As a matter of routine, FBI officials contacted the CIA to check to see if al-Bayoumi was there to support their investigations. The confidential sources said that the CIA officials responded to the San Diego field office and reported that the CIA had no files on al-Bayoumi. This is the guy who welcomed in the September 11th hijackers. But the confidential human source told me that that was false and that the CIA maintained operational files on al-Bayoumi and helped work with him via those operational files. See, the CIA is not allowed to conduct operations here in America. So what this report is supposing is that the CIA used the Saudis, who can conduct intelligence operations here in America because it's obviously not Saudi soil, right? So they can do clandestine work abroad. And so they were trying to figure out the terror network, so they welcomed these terrorists in order to monitor them, track them, try and surveil them hand in glove with the Saudis. Okay. Confidential sources told me that al-Bayoumi was never passed off to the FBI. That al-Bayoumi was an intelligence officer in the employ of the Saudi government. Al-Bayoumi, who again met the hijackers as soon as they landed in San Diego, was instructed to recruit the two hijackers at the Saudi consulate. So this man was instructed to recruit and bring these hijackers to America. Al-Bayoumi ended up paying for their rent, setting them up in an apartment, getting them established here in the country. There are witnesses to these meetings. Again, this is directly from our own federal government's findings. This has been declassified. Confidential source told me that the CIA used their liaison relationship with the Saudi intelligence services to conduct this operation on U.S. soil. Confidential human source told me that the Saudis were used as a go-between for the CIA, forbidden by law to conduct intelligence operations inside of the U.S. Confidential human source told me that the CIA used this relationship with allied intelligence services to conduct operations inside the United States in the past, and that they knew that these two men that were welcomed into the country were part of a terror network, and they withheld that from the FBI. Confidential human source told me that after 9/11, FBI officials in San Diego and FBI's headquarters became aware of al-Bayoumy's affiliation with the Saudi intelligence and subsequently the existence of the CIA's operation to recruit the hijackers through al-Bayoumi. Senior FBI officials suppressed this investigation. Confidential human source told me that the FBI agents testifying before the joint inquiry on the September 11th attack were instructed not to reveal the full extent of Saudi's involvement with al-Qaeda. I here declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and to the best of my knowledge, says a government agent with 30 years of intelligence and investigations under his belt, Donald C. Castriano. Well, there you go. Knock it down. Knock it down. Prove to me that this isn't true. This is our own federal agents. This guy with the longest history of investigations and intelligence gathering went through and spoke with agents inside the FBI and the CIA, and they said that the CIA brought in at least two of those hijackers into America as part of an intelligence operation with the help of the Saudi government, and that all that was withheld. Ladies and gentlemen, we went to the border recently, and we released a documentary on this. It's a great documentary. I hope that you watch it. But whilst we were there, we were speaking to the county commissioner in Yuma, and he said, you do know that the 9/11 hijackers went through our porous southern border, right? They traveled through Yuma in order to go to flight school in Tucson. You know, they took advantage of America's open border policy and lax border controls in order to do this. We got it on camera. We have it on tape. We didn't end up looking this up. And of course, this man is completely correct. He's lived in Yuma his entire life. Yuma, Arizona knows that it was a way station for the September 11th attackers based on open borders and our porous, incompetent immigration system. Watch.
And becomes this. We're only going to solve this greatest human smuggling, trafficking, humanitarian crisis with real solutions. That is not a real solution. That's called an open border, and is not secure.
It's estimated somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million people who have come into the United States, not as give-ups, but people who have avoided detection, who are here for nefarious purposes. This was a pass-through for all of the 9/11 hijackers, where they were going from San Diego over to Tucson for their flight training. And what will it take before the Biden administration puts our safety and security at the forefront to secure our country?
So did you see there? Those are the photos of the hijackers. They traveled from San Diego after being welcomed at the airport by a Saudi government official that our own government sources say was working for the CIA, in hand in glove with the CIA, being put up in an apartment where they paid the rent for it. How are these guys going to pay rent? How are these guys going to function? They're illegally inside of our nation on an illegal visa program. How are they welcomed in? At some level, there needed to be an operation here. And then how did they go to flight school? Seriously? They went to flight school in Tucson. We know this. How these guys, they don't speak any English. How'd they go to flight school? How'd they even get in? How's it even allowed? In Tucson, there are these massive military bases. The biggest airplane boneyard in all of America is in Tucson, Arizona. Military bases, nuclear weapons silos in Tucson, and we let the 9/11 hijackers go to flight school there? They went through Yuma? Through the open borders? Nobody cared? People are rightfully furious. So when we say never forget, that's what we mean. Vivek followed up in that CNN interview, where the CNN, of course, the harpy CNN hosts, no, don't talk about it, don't talk about it, don't talk about it. The government never lies. The government didn't lie. No, the government says it lied. This is the government's documents. Vivek saying that finally, if you're going to say never forget, you should probably support the victims of 9/11 families. Again, of course, always respecting and honoring the Americans who were murdered that day based on these apparent, botched operations by the CIA. By remembering them, you should probably, consider supporting their lawsuit against the federal government. Do you know the 9/11 survivor families are suing our federal government? Is that what we mean when we say never forget? We remember? Yeah. Well, let's remember that they're suing the federal government. We have the lawsuit here. 9/11 families sue Washington, D.C. Thousands of September 11th family members and survivors have today urged the federal court in New York to revive claims that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia funded and supported al-Qaeda as it prepared for September 11th attacks. The suits accuse the kingdom of a singular role in providing essential resources that enabled al-Qaeda to grow into a terrorist organization that killed nearly 3,000 people on American soil, injured the scores of Americans, and continue to affect the lives of others in the years since the attack. They go on to say that, of course, the government has blocked these lawsuits from going forward and have lied in their official September 11th commission to reveal the Saudi government's complicity in these attacks. Why would they do that? Well, you're never going to get the answer to these questions unless you start asking. At least Vivek is asking. Watch.
But that Saudi Arabia absolutely was involved, and our government for 20 years lied to the American people about it.
There was an entire 9/11 Commission report on this.
Yes, and it lied, and it was false. And in fact, you know where that's coming out, Caitlin? There's now a federal case in the Southern District of New York, where the government of Saudi Arabia is being sued by victims of families. That's why this is resurfacing itself. It is relevant, and it turns out
there's a difference in asking questions about Saudi Arabia's involvement and the government's involvement, and then pushing this idea that what your comment about who was on the plane and then was 9/11 an inside job, where you did not say no earlier. That's why.
So, what happened in the immediate aftermath of September 11th? Well, of course, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act led to the warrantless surveillance state that utterly shreds your Third and Fourth Amendment rights to privacy. Why were our founders in a pre-electricity world so concerned about privacy? Well, because tyranny is the same in every single era. The Third Amendment is about the government housing and quartering soldiers in your home. What was common during the Revolutionary War time is that the government would simply put a soldier inside your house if they didn't like you. A soldier would come into your home and sleep in your bed. Law enforcement would break into your house and would sleep in your bed. That's what the Third Amendment's about. Could you imagine that? Joe Biden sending people to just take over your home, eat your food? They would have rights to everything inside of your property. And then the Fourth Amendment, of course, is about warrantless searches and seizures, and the rights to not have that happen, obviously, from a law enforcement perspective. How you must have a warrant. The Patriot Act immolates that, just destroys that. Patriot Act is what put Dr. Fauci in charge of our bioweapons programs. That's well established. Patriot Act created Dr. Fauci and his funding. Patriot Act is the most evil, anti-American piece of legislation. You notice they always find the names. They always find the names that wrap and ensconce themselves in the American flag, right, to name these things. It is the opposite of the Patriot Act. It is the destruction of Patriotism Act. And we should recognize that with open eyes. And we should look with very open eyes at George W. Bush and his legacy. And if George W. Bush is a psyop, and was George W. Bush there to put us to sleep as Republicans, as people who care about the Constitution? Democrats don't care about the Constitution. Was George W. Bush there to put us to sleep so that these agencies could engorge themselves on this unlimited power to creep into our lives, to create the warrantless security state that is utterly antithetical to our Constitution, with the pretext of an emergency? Ooh, man. Have you ever heard that before? Anyone, can we put up the September 11th towers one more time? Anybody, these are the people who were murdered on that day. Nearly 3,000 Americans. Anybody who says that these victims of murder are somehow comparable to January 6th can go directly to hell. Just a reminder that our national security state, our deep state, and their apparatchiks, Muppets, that they install in our government perpetually creates that illusion and manufactures that lie. This is how desperate they are to lean on national tragedies and moments of emergency to retain power. Watch.
Not only a place on our calendars, but a place in our collective memory. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. And January 6th, 2021.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden is not at Ground Zero. He's not in Shanksville. Joe Biden's not at the Pentagon this morning. In fact, Joe Biden is in Alaska, somewhere, petting a polar bear. Who is at Ground Zero this morning? Well, they're doing this in plain sight. Check this tweet out from Jack. You can see standing there in the shadow of what used to be the Twin Towers is front and center Kamala Harris. The person who was on camera saying January 6th, just like September 11th. You know, when the unarmed Trump supporter was shot with no warning at point blank range and killed. That, the single death on January 6th, a American killed by the state. No, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden's in Alaska. Joe Biden is the first president in 22 years to not mark September 11th by going to one of the tragedy sites. And perhaps that's a good thing, because there was no greater mouthpiece for the unaccountable superstate in the aftermath of September 11th than Joe Biden. Joe Biden was the first, dumbest, and most rabid banger of the war drums to invade countries that, as far as I can tell, had nothing to do with September 11th. They invaded Saddam. Saddam was a bad guy because, well, he puts his political enemies in prison. He allows for his family to create a reign of terror in a country and to rule by decree. He protects his sons from all crimes. Who does that remind you of? How can you possibly justify the invasion of Iraq today? How can you possibly do it? It was a distraction technique. The Patriot Act is the most evil piece of legislation ever passed. And the number one champion of it, as you may recall, is currently the President of the United States. Watch.
The objective is to compel Iraq to destroy its illegal weapons of mass destruction and its programs to develop and produce missiles and more of those weapons. Saddam is dangerous. The world would be a better place without him. But the reason he poses a growing danger to the United States and its allies is that he possesses chemical and biological weapons and is seeking nuclear weapons. And unlike my colleague from West Virginia and Maryland, I do not believe this is a rush to war. I believe it's a march to peace and security. I believe that failure to overwhelmingly support this resolution is likely to enhance the prospects that war will occur.
Joe Biden.
Do we have peace and security? Do you feel like we have a better world now than we did in 1999? Do we have a safer, better country? Do we have a more stable dollar? Do we have a more profitable America? Do we have a more secure America because of Joe Biden and the policies that he beat the war drums for? Joe Biden there just straight up lying, repeating intelligence agency lies. We know this to be a lie. Repeating lie after lie after lie about September 11th, doing precisely what the intel agencies told him to do, and you wonder why his family is protected. We have said often on this show that Joe Biden they love an idiot, okay? The intel agencies, the people who actually run the country, the superstate, the machine, they love an imbecile. They love a dumb person who will just be trotted out and read the script. That's why they love Mitch McConnell. They actually prey on the mentally disabled. And Joe Biden has been that for a very long time. Joe Biden has always been a fraud and a liar. Check the tape from him running for president in the 80s. Lying about his about his law school, lying, plagiarizing, having to drop out in humiliation and shame. They love these craven monsters who simply want and lust for power, and they say, walk out and say that Saddam is trying to build a nuclear weapon with zero evidence. Walk out and say that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction with zero evidence. And meanwhile, we sell out to China. Meanwhile, we engorge and create the newest enemies for America. And Joe Biden, as the American resident, is fomenting nuclear war with Russia as we speak. Spying on his political enemies, locking up his political enemies, trying to put his political enemies in jail. Doing precisely what he accuses Saddam Hussein of doing. And I don't think that there's anyone who would argue that Osama bin Laden is a deeply evil person and deserved to die and be killed. I certainly wouldn't argue that. Osama bin Laden is the banality of evil. The world's a better place without him. There was perhaps one man that did argue that Osama bin Laden shouldn't die, and that one man was Joe Biden. Watch.
And we had to make a decision. The president, he went around the table with all the senior people, including the chiefs of staff, and he said, I have to make this decision. What is your opinion? He started with the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State, and he ended with me. Every single person in that room hedged their bet, except Leon Panetta. Leon said, go. Everyone else said, 49, 51, so it got to me and he said, Joe, what do you think? And I said, I didn't know we had so many economists around the table. I said, we owe the man a direct answer. Mr. President, my suggestion is don't go. We have to do two more things to see if he's there. He walked out and said, I'll give you my decision.
Don't go. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, could you imagine? Could you imagine being so compromised and so genuinely evil that you would straight up say, nah, we have Osama bin Laden, we can kill him. Nah. Truly evil. Remember we played you this clip. We had to dig into the archives to find it. It was Donald Trump predicting in the year 1999 that there would be a horrible attack on the World Trade Centers, and they would probably blame Osama bin Laden on it. Who would you rather as president? It's worth going through and actually looking at these vintage clips of Donald Trump and his reactions to the World Trade Center collapsing. Donald Trump went immediately to ground zero, as any leader would, and immediately started helping after the attacks on September 11th. Where was Joe Biden? Joe Biden was lying professionally about the attacks on September 11th. And then Joe Biden was saying, no, don't kill Osama. Let's check in on Trump. Watch.
What's your biggest fear, Mr. Trump?
Well, I just went to what they call ground zero. I've never seen anything like it. The devastation, the human life that's been just wasted for no reason whatsoever. It is a terrible scene. It's a terrible sight. But New Yorkers are very strong and resilient, and they'll rebuild quickly.
What should be the response to this attack? How should the U.S. respond to such a devastation?
Well, I think they have to respond quickly and effectively. They have to find out exactly what the cause was, who did it, and they have to go after these people because there is no other choice. And then secondarily, and much less importantly, we have to rebuild in some form that will be just as majestic as the World Trade Center.
Donald Trump suggested, I think, the only World Trade Center design that was, and this has been lost to history. It's actually very interesting. We'll see if we can go find it. Donald Trump's suggestion was to rebuild the World Trade Centers, but just much, much taller. To do like a full, straight, line-to-line rebuild of the towers. Exactly where they were, which would have been the alpha move, I think. It was Trump's suggestions. He even had models. That showed exactly what he was going to do, what he was going to build. Here's an image of Donald Trump at ground zero. You can still see the foggy background there with the smoke and the smoldering. This is the man in the arena. This has been Trump his entire career. This is the man in the arena. We're going to show you the image of what Donald Trump wanted to build at the site of the Twin Towers, and we will be joined by Rudy Giuliani, who was there with Donald Trump to rebuild New York City in a moment. But ladies and gentlemen, it's worth noting exactly how fraudulent the worldview of Joe Biden and the superstate is, exactly how collapsed it is. Again, I think that September 11th marked the end of the American empire. I think that it marked the moment, the bell ringing of when our best days were behind us. And I believe that they can be recaptured. But if we're truly to never forget, we are to then understand that we need to do a major soul search into the people who brought us September 11th and who were behind it. We need to actually ask questions. We need to read the filings and look at what the government knew, what they didn't know, and how they acted. And you can see every step of the way the government lied to you. And now they wish to foment a new war. Just as soon as they pull out from Afghanistan and get 13 more Americans killed, they wish to bring our entire nation into a new nuclear holocaust of their making in Ukraine. This is the viral clip that just absolutely went thermonuclear this weekend. Legendary actor Woody Harrelson was asked about his views on the war between Russia and Ukraine and had, I think, a perfect response. Woody Harrelson's uttered a lot of lines on camera that have been really well written. This one is just perfect. Watch.
You know, I'm the kind of guy who just thinks it's abominable when a superpower with all this military might, with no provocation, attacks a country that is, Iraq. I'm sorry, Korea. No, sorry, Ukraine. Terrible.
America, as a people, have always been isolationist, non-interventionist. And in George Washington's farewell address, he warned of us getting entangled in entanglements abroad and how it would lead to the destruction of our nation, as it does to all great nations. And we should heed those warnings today. We should look to a worldview that says America first. If you were to have actually cared about any American that lost their lives on September 11th, then you would have closed the borders. You would have taken all of the goodwill of the American people in the aftermath of those attacks, and you would have done something to secure our homeland, because that's where the effing attack happened. Do you feel secure in this nation 22 years later? Do you feel like the powers that be secured our country to stop terrorists from coming in here and doing harm to us? Of course not. In fact, there is regular crossings of men on the terrorist watch list directly into our nation. Who knows where they are now? It's worse than it's ever been under Joe Biden's watch. We need serious leadership in this country, or else it will happen again. And this whole never forget thing will have all been an utter fraud. Totally and utterly debased. There was one man at one point in time that said, close the borders. We need to shut it all down so we can figure out what the hell is going on. Build a wall. Have an immigration process and system that allows for people that are seeking asylum to make their claims. That allows for us to actually figure out who the hell is coming into this country. It was a broken immigration system, of course, that on its face led to the initial attacks. Every single one of the attackers had overstayed their visa. That man was Donald Trump. This is Donald Trump's suggestion of what we should have done to rebuild the World Trade Center. I think this is beautiful. Let me know in the comment section. Do you think this would have been a great design? Just rebuild the towers, but taller? From the article. In the years following the attacks on September 11th, Donald Trump pushed the proposal that would have rebuilt the World Trade Center's iconic Twin Towers, with the only difference being the towers being 5 stories taller, so that they would be 1776 foot tall. Amazing. Instead of going with Trump plans, the city officials opted to build Freedom Tower. In an interview with MSNBC in 2005, a decade before starting his run for president, Trump called Freedom Tower disgusting and a junkyard. I would rather have nothing than to have what they're building, Trump said. It's a terrible design. It was designed by an egghead architect who doesn't have a lot of experience designing something like this. Trump said he wanted the World Trade Center towers back. What I want to see built is the World Trade Center stronger and maybe a story taller, Trump said, before the construction of the Freedom Tower. That's what everyone wants. Is that what you want? I'll tell you what, man. I want Donald Trump back in office for a lot of reasons. There are so many ways to attack a country. There are so many ways to debase a nation. Obviously, attacks from the inside. That's what you see with the fall of the Roman Empire. Fall of the Roman Empire. I'm studying this right now. I'm not like some history genius, but I'm studying the fall of the Roman Empire because a lot of people compare it to what is happening to America right now. Rome fell due to two things. Open borders that welcomed in the Visigoths, the enemies of Rome, to go and sack Rome and to destroy Rome from the inside. That's one. And then two, the debasement of the currency. And you note that both things are happening right now to our nation, thanks to our American resident. And so, ladies and gentlemen, if you're sick and tired of the lies spun by the Biden government, well, maybe it's time to hedge a little bit in something other than our dollar, which is, of course, being inflated out of existence. Ladies and gentlemen, the market volatility, the bank volatility, it's all casting doubt on your ability to retire comfortably. Consider investing with my friends at Allegiance Gold. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine retiring with the peace of mind and the freedom to pursue your own dreams with your retirement backed by something that has held value throughout the ages. When it comes to protecting your IRA or 401k, trust the best. That's why my friends at Allegiance Gold have the highest ratings in precious metals in the industry. 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rating with the better Business Bureau, and A+ across the board. Get up to $5,000 in free silver with qualifying purchase when you visit protectwithbenny.com today. Give them a call at 844-66-BENNY. Don't wait. Go gold. Don't let Joe Biden destroy one more thing in this country. That thing being, of course, your retirement and your savings. So you would assume that Joe Biden would not usher in the eve of September 11th inside of a communist nation, but that is precisely what he did. You would assume that Joe Biden would try and project a little bit of strength and not have the mics cut by his own staff after he makes sexist jokes and tells people he needs to go to bed. But nope, that's exactly where we were yesterday. Tactless Biden says, "Good evening, Vietnam," while in Hanoi, as he mistakes Robin Williams' anti-war movie for a song during another bizarre press conference where he rants about Indians and John Wayne. My God, ladies and gentlemen. My God. Okay, so let's begin here. Let's begin here by stating, one, Joe Biden's not doing great. There's a reason why Kamala Harris was front and center at the World Trade Center this morning. They're being kind of like open about this. And why Kamala Harris was cackling all week about how she's ready to take Biden's spot. How Gavin Newsom last week said, oh, Kamala's already lined up to do that in a major Freudian slip. Here's Chuck Todd from this week on his last broadcast, Meet the Press, talking about Joe Biden's polling. Watch.
For the Democrats, the issue, of course, is Biden's age. In a CNN poll this week, nearly 7 in 10 Democrats said the party should nominate, quote, a different candidate than Joe Biden. And it was the biggest concern among 49% of all Democrats. The biggest concern was Biden's age. Overall, just 28% of Americans say Biden inspires confidence. That's down 24 points from 2 years ago when he was just 4 months into his presidency.
Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden is not doing great. Joe Biden is collapsing in such a spectacular fashion that the last guards, right, like the king's guards, like the people that protect the king when the castle is under attack, like the last vestige of guards against Joe Biden have now turned on the king. Okay? That's the corporate press. You see that from NBC. Check this out from CNN over the weekend.
Because, if you're in his camp and you're looking at these latest poll numbers, you have to be really concerned. Job approval, 39%. And the trajectory here, not great, right? This has been dipping. How are things going in the country right now? Badly, 70% say. Does he have the stamina sharpness to serve effectively? 74% say no. I mean, what's going on here as you see it?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk to people on the campaign and even the White House, there is a gap, a very evident gap, that as much as they might be going out there and saying, hey, look, unemployment rate is very low. The economy is getting better. Inflation is lower. People are not believing it. And to try and get people to understand that things might be getting better over time or have been getting better, that is a problem. And at this moment, we are not necessarily seeing the president or his campaign going out there trying to fix that gap.
So now you have NBC, CNN, and who's the final? Who's the final in the phalanx against Biden? Oh, goodness, the New York Times. Listen, man, if you have headlines like this, why is Joe Biden so unpopular, running in the New York Times, you're finished. You're toast. There's a signal. There's a button that goes out. There's a signal that flashes and goes, we're not going to allow him to run. The internals are so bad that we must actually take him out ourselves, the corporate media says. Joe Biden is an unpopular president, and without some recovery, he could easily lose to Donald Trump, writes the New York Times. By itself, it is no great wonder. His two predecessors were also unpopular at this stage of their presidency, also endangered in their re-election bids. For Biden, though, there was a normal honeymoon months of reasonably high approval ratings that ended only with the chaotic withdrawal of Afghanistan. And in a sense, it's been hard to distill a singular explanation for what's kept the numbers so lousy. Well, I'll let the New York Times ponder and all that. And I'll cut to Joe Biden in the communist nation of Vietnam, declaring, good evening, Vietnam. Maybe this is part of why Joe Biden is so unpopular.
It is evening, isn't it?
It's around the world in 5 days is interesting. Well, there's that, one of my staff members said, remember the famous song, Good Morning Vietnam? Well, good evening Vietnam. Good morning.
My God. Is this really about debasing America? So Barack Obama is, of course, running Joe Biden, operating Joe Biden as a cutout. We all are aware of that. Barack Obama has often opted for the humiliation of America. I mean, they're doing this on purpose, right? Like, they're doing this on purpose to shove it in our faces, right? The humiliation continues. Joe Biden bringing back one of his favorite sayings, lying dog-faced pony soldier.
My brother loves having those famous lines from movies that he always quotes. And one of them is there's a movie about John Wayne. He's an Indian scout, and they're trying to get I think it was Apache, one of the great tribes of America, back on the reservation. And he's standing with the Union, so they're all armed, they're on their horses in their saddles, and there's 3 or 4 Indians in headdresses, and the Union soldiers basically saying, Indians, come with me, we'll take care of you, everything will be good. And the Indian looks at John Wayne and points to the Union soldier and says, he's a lion, dog-faced pony soldier. What was that?
Wait, so a couple things here. Again, you're slipping into lucidity here. Have you ever been with anyone in hospice? I have. And they start to actually have, they lose consciousness. They lose connection with reality. Joe Biden's saying Indians on reservations. These are by the way, 2 words you're not allowed to use. They're stricken from the lexicon. Talking about John Wayne, lying dog-faced pony soldier, telling women that they should throw softballs at him. Oh yeah, that happened. Watch.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope you didn't think that calling only on women would get you softballs tonight.
Oh, I know better than that.
Okay, well, let me start with President Xi.
If you sent me a softball, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'd probably strike out even worse.
Maybe it's time for you to go to bed, Grandpa. And that's exactly what Joe Biden did. Listen.
Anyway, I just think that there are other things on leaders' minds, and they respond to what's needed at the time. And look, nobody likes having celebrated international meetings if you don't know what you want at the meeting, if you don't have a game plan. He may have a game plan. He just hasn't shared it with me. But I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go to bed.
He's saying it. He's saying it. But he didn't go to bed. In fact, Joe Biden had to have his staff cut his mic. They just turned him off. In case you're wondering if the resident of the United States is simply a muppet, a meat puppet that's being paraded around, watch this inexplicable clip of Biden's staff cutting his mic.
We talked about at the conference overall. We talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the southern hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all. He came up to me.
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh my God. Oh. Rolls Royce is in the studio being like, should I cut this? I'm like, no, man. Let them play the jazz music as the guy shuffles off the stage. Everyone watching for sandbags. As his staff, did you hear staff screaming over the reporters? That's it. That's it. Get off the stage. They cut his mic. You ever seen anything like it? What about your son being indicted, Mr. President? What about our next guest, Rudy Giuliani, saying that he's never seen a more clear-cut case for bribery ever in American history? And we've been promising you that when Republicans get back, bribery is exactly what they're going to be impeaching Joe Biden for. One of the sort of bellwethers in Congress for this impeachment has been Nancy Mace, and she said just as much this weekend. And joining us then after shall be Rudy Giuliani to talk more about it. But first, Nancy Mace, check this out.
Let's start with the Biden impeachment inquiry. The House Speaker told Maria Bartiromo himself that he does expect to bring any House impeachment inquiry to a full vote on the floor. When do you expect that would happen? Will it happen in the month of September?
Well, we'll know a little bit more information this week. We go into session on Tuesday. Bribery is one of the bases for an impeachment inquiry or articles of impeachment in Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. But the problem, Dagan, as you know, is we will never get 60 votes in a Democrat-controlled Senate, no matter how much evidence we prevent. And so, from my perspective, the House Oversight, Judiciary, Ways and Means need to continue our investigations. We need to show the American people all of the evidence that we uncover. We need to do it in swift order. We need more subpoenas. I want the bookkeeper. I want Shokin. I want Hunter. I want everybody who was a witness and saw what we saw in the suspicious activity reports. That information we have to win in the court of public opinion.
So there was one man who came on our program, I believe it was a week or two ago, who said, I've never seen a more clear-cut case for bribery in American history. Of course, I was a federal prosecutor and so forth. That man is also the man that stood tall as America's mayor and marched New York City forward in the aftermath of the attacks on September 11th. And that man joins our program now, the great Rudy Giuliani. Rudy, thank you so much for today of all days making the time for us on the program. We have been informed that you just came from Ground Zero. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, Ben.
And you were standing very close to Kamala Harris.
Well, I wasn't too close. I mean, they don't put those of us who had anything to do with September 11th too close to the, you know, the ones that had the main attention were the ones who weren't there when it happened. Yes. Had very little to do with it, and are now making America much more unsafe than it was then by allowing anybody to come in that wants to come in, namely any terrorist that wants to come in.
Yes. We've done an entire show about how the goodwill after September 11th and all of the money, the trillions we've spent, none of it was spent on securing our border or reforming our immigration system. In fact, Kamala Harris just moments ago was saying that January 6th is just like September 11th. This is a day that will live in infamy, she said.
Yeah, it was hard to be there, Benny.
What would you have said to her?
I've gone, you know, every year since it's, this is the year where I couldn't really stay. I almost felt like I wasn't being true to the memory of the people who died on that day, to be with these people. I mean, no group, no administration has ever done the damage that this group has done. I mean, I was there all through the Obama administration. I could deal with that. But to have Harris and Mayorkas there, I mean, these people are allowing an invasion of the United States to take place, and probably more than most, I have a pretty good idea of how the Islamic terrorists are taking advantage of this. I mean, just think if you were running an Islamic terrorist group and you knew that you could get anyone you wanted into the United States. Anyone. Just pay the cartels who you've been doing business with for 25 years, and they'll get them in for you, no questions asked. Would you take advantage of that? You wouldn't be much of an Islamic terrorist if you didn't. So they have sold us out. I mean, they sold us out to China. They sold us out to the Islamic terrorists. They sold us out to the cartels, whether it's Biden or Mayorkas or Harris. So after about a half hour, 45 minutes, Bernie and I decided to leave and go to a different ceremony.
Wow. So you decided to just walk because you just couldn't stand being there with
couldn't
people
take it anymore. I just couldn't take standing there with them, and all the terrible thoughts going through my mind about how they have double-crossed not only the people that gave up their lives that day, but all the people since then that have been fighting terrorism for us.
Yes.
And now we just have a completely open border.
Yes.
So that any Islamic terrorist, extremist that wants to come in can come in, or so that China can kill even more of us with fentanyl. I mean, why does China have to have a shooting war with us? They can kill 100,000 of us a year without firing a gun. They just send in fentanyl, and we take it. And Biden does nothing about it. Biden has actually done away with the special unit to focus on Chinese who were infiltrating our organizations and our universities. When I say it's the strongest bribery case I've ever seen, I'm somebody who prosecuted some of the most famous bribery cases of the 20th century. I'm not speaking lightly. I've never had a case, Benny, with the amount of evidence that you have against the Biden family. It's so much evidence that the main key in trying that case would be having the discipline to pare it down so you didn't overdo it.
Well, apparently the Republicans in Congress are listening to you, because now they're citing line and verse precisely what you told me last interview about the U.S. Constitution, about federal code, and about the bribery focus. And I do want to get there, but I would like to spend one more second on a specific piece of incredibly odious and venal commentary by Kamala Harris as it pursuant September 11th. Effectively standing on the graves of nearly 3,000 Americans who died that day, saying that it is the same as January 6th. What is your commentary on that, Mr. Mayor?
My commentary is that there is something seriously wrong with her. We failed to take a good look of what was seriously wrong with Biden, and look what we got. There's something seriously wrong with Kamala Harris. Those language soup that she engages in, which almost is like a 5-year-old speaking, and that's not normal. To try to compare January 6th to September 11th, I mean, how do you even seriously do that? 3,000 people just about died on September 11th. Could be another 3,000 pretty soon with the illnesses thereafter. I think we're at about 2,734 right now. People are dying every day of related illnesses. It was a direct attack on the United States of America by a foreign enemy. None of New York City police officers killed anyone that day. In their case, a Capitol police officer killed a innocent person for no reason at all. I mean, the shooting that took place, to me, is a first-degree murder case that I'd be more than happy to prosecute against that cop. The thing was exaggerated way out of proportion. They said 4 people died. Nobody died except for the protesters. No gun was used. There's been no charge of insurrection. 1,000 arrests, no charge of insurrection. No proof of insurrection. Yet they want to charge insurrection against the president without proving it. So it's a complete phony. I mean, it's a political exaggeration of, yes, basically a bad thing that happened that deserves a certain level of proportionate punishment. But to compare it to September 11th, the Civil War, what else
Pearl
are they
Harbor
compared it to?
is the other. Pearl
World
Harbor
War
is the
II?
other allegory she used. Yeah.
I mean, it's absurd. I mean, it means you're living in a world of vicious, vile propaganda. About the only analogies to it would be the kind of thing the communists and the Nazis did.
So this has been a party, the modern-day Democrat Party has been a party that might tweet "Never Forget" on September 11th, but does the exact opposite. You brought up the border policies. I also wanted to harken back to a few years ago when Ilhan Omar, who is a celebrated member of the Democrat Party, said some people did something to mark September 11th and its anniversary. Your thoughts on that, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, they have no respect for what happened that day, because they have no respect for our country. I mean, what happened that day is Islamic extremist terrorists, in the name of destroying us, came and attacked us. It was a foreign attack on the United States of America, and their objective was to crush us because they attacked us, our economic center, they attacked our political center, and to a very large extent, they attacked our cultural center, and they failed. They succeeded in the objective of killing a lot of us, but they failed to defeat our spirit. For some reason, thank God, we all came together after that as Americans. Now it seems to me the communists have worked around that, starting with Obama, and they've come pretty close to making us what they want. When you look at our system of non-justice, it really is much more comparable to a fascist country than to a country of laws. I mean, when the former president and the leading candidate of the opposition party gets indicted for charges that it's impossible to figure out anybody else that was ever charged with this before, then you know you have a fascist government. This is the major characteristic of a fascist government is put your enemies in jail on specious fraudulent charges. I mean, what the heck is what is going on in Georgia, or what the guy in Washington is doing? Nobody's ever been charged with those things before. I don't remember anybody ever being charged with RICO for defending his client in an election fraud case. That's what I'm charged with. I'm charged with a racketeering violation because I represented my client. And you can't tell me you didn't start going after me and persecuting me because the first day you went and stole my iCloud account was the first day I began representing Donald Trump 4 years ago. The FBI went and took my iCloud account without telling me. And you know when they let it go? The day I stopped representing Donald Trump. So you spied on me for 3.5 years as a lawyer without telling me. You had an affidavit claiming I was committing crimes. And then you had a right to a grand jury saying you couldn't find any crimes. Even after you searched my entire apartment, my law office, the end result of all of that, which, by the way, they never report on CNN, MSNBC, I received a letter from the U.S. Attorney's Office saying I committed no crimes. So this is a terrible situation we're in. We're only going to fix it at the ballot box, and we're going to have to fix it. And I think the only person who can fix it is Donald Trump. I like a lot of the other Republicans. I just can't be sure. I can't be sure they have the necessary, unbelievable, incredible amount of strength it's going to take to fix this.
I find this. I find what you just said there utterly compelling, Mr. Mayor, because what you seem victim of is a warrantless security state and a surveillance state that was established in the aftermath of September 11th using the goodwill of the American people to pass the Patriot Act that desecrates the Fourth Amendment and arguably the Third Amendment in our Constitution. Your 100%. Thoughts on the Patriot Act and your thoughts on the FISA court and what this monster that it's turned into?
I was a supporter of all that. I helped to create the FISA court. You probably don't know that, but I was in the Ford administration before I was in the Reagan administration. And I hired the first attorneys for the FISA court. I handled some of the first FISA warrants. I understand, but I treated the FISA court, this is way back, in the days we were going after Russian spies. I treated it as a sacred obligation. It was even more sacred than my usual obligation as a prosecutor because no one was going to get to review what I was doing. It was between me and the court and God. So to see what Comey and these people did with it, to me was like completely shocking and very upsetting because I supported all that. I hired Jim Comey originally as an assistant U.S. attorney. Can't understand what happened to him. And it is true. And there's a good chance that these will be taken away and maybe have to be taken away. But then that on the other side, that's going to leave us vulnerable to real terrorists, not parents who are worried about their children being mutilated.
So, in the aftermath of September 11th, you were able to observe Donald Trump very closely. There's this really great photo of you and him with a jackhammer. I think we have it available, and it's. Can you tell me what's it? I don't know what if you can see, Mr. Mayor, the screen right now. Can you tell me about Donald Trump in the aftermath of September 11th? Did you get to know
Donald
him?
Donald Trump was among 10 or 12 of our civic leaders that did the most to help us. I would put him in a category with George Steinbrenner, Fred Wilpon. There are certain people that really stepped up. They took it very, very seriously right from the first day. And he helped us in so many different ways, including material that we would have a hard time getting because he was in the construction business. Not only his own money, but putting us in contact with people where we could raise money. I started my own charity just for my firefighters and police officers called the Twin Towers Fund. We raised $240 million. We distributed every single penny to the firefighters and police officers' family. And we paid the administrative costs separately. Donald Trump helped us do that. He, Steinbrenner, the head of General Electric at the time, and Fred Wilpon were among the top people that did that, and about 8 or 10 others. And he was constantly volunteering help. And by the way, he did it for years. He and George Steinbrenner were good friends. And whenever a police officer was hurt, certainly killed, hurt, injured, firefighter, they'd always send him a check. And very often they'd send it through a foundation. And I would want them, I'd want to tell the family and Steinbrenner, who I guess was the senior partner in the deal, kind of said he had this biblical view that if you get the credit now, you don't get it in heaven. Right? So very often people would be getting money, they didn't know who he got it from. Donald, I used to call him Donald then, used to participate in that with his friend George. I mean, up until the time he was running for president, no one ever thought of Donald other than a very generous philanthropic New Yorker that would help you. And sometimes he'd go out of his way to help you, in unorthodox ways. Like he'd see that somebody needed money and he'd come up with $5,000. He'll help that person. And he did it for, and the other thing that drives me nuts is when I hear this racism stuff or anti-Semitism stuff. I don't know a guy who's got more friends who are Black, Jewish, Italian, everything. I mean, the guy just likes people. The joke about him is the only color that really was a problem for him, that he had a real fascination for, was green. But other than that, if he could make money with you, then you were really great. It was always merit or friendship. What they're doing to him, wow. I've been in politics a long time. I saw what they did to Ronald Reagan, who was my hero. This is unprecedented. And I think it's simple. I mean, it took me a while to figure it out, Ben, but it's because he's so dangerous. It really is. This is a credit. Maybe it doesn't help sometimes when you're being tortured like this, but this is a credit to how effective he is. They are afraid that he is going to destroy how they have been milking this country for years. Yes. Either being very powerful, being very rich. I mean, where would the Biden family have ever made any money other than by bribery, right? Yes. I mean, Biden couldn't get his way through grammar school.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, something that's popped up in this 2016 run, Vivek Ramaswamy, one of the Republican candidates who's brought this up, is the government obscuring some of the Saudi Arabian involvement in September 11th and the attacks and the funding of some of these hijackers that came to America. in the aftermath, they've sort of been releasing these reports and declassifying these reports. Your thought on the government and the obstructionism when it comes to how these attackers got into America, the brokenness of our immigration system, and some of the operations that seem to be the CIA not coordinating with the FBI in order to warn them about these things or to run these ops through the Saudi government. I'm not sure if you followed up on this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I haven't in great detail because that really wasn't my area, but I do have some thoughts about it. I think this is a product of lack of transparency. I mean, I don't know how deeply involved the Saudi Arabian government was or was not. But I don't have the information that would allow me to make that decision. So whenever that information is being held back, then people who have been affected by it, like I have and my friends, and some even worse than me, you're going to be very suspicious. It's like the 4 or 5 states that Trump, I believe, won where he was cheated. One of the reasons I believe that is they would never let me see the paper. Let's take Georgia, for example, with Governor Kemp, who I think is one of the more dishonorable men in America. They, no matter what, would never let us look at the paper. So I believe that a lot of that paper is phony, that it was written up after the election, printed up, and that if we had had a chance to forensically examine it, we could show that 40, 50, 60, 70,000 phony ballots were submitted. They have never, ever allowed for a forensic examination of it. What I mean by that is taking the paper of the official ballot, putting it in a machine, and putting all the ballots that were run against it and spitting out the ones that don't match.
And you're saying that the government obscuring some of this information in the official 9/11 report leads people to believe and to assume that there's something.
I guess I'm a New Yorker and I'm a former prosecutor, but when you don't want to give me something, I start getting funny thoughts about it, right? So let me see all the files that have to do with Saudi Arabia. You know, the Saudi Arabian government, the royal family, is very complex. There are many parts to it. It could be that some parts were involved and some parts weren't. There are parts of the Saudi Arabian government were very anti-terrorist. Some parts of the Saudi Arabian royal family had problems. So you need to see the facts. And when they won't give you the facts, you start to think, why not? They were 15 out of 19 with Saudi Arabian, so it isn't as if we're asking for no reason. It's like the same thing they're doing with the election. When they start saying Trump couldn't possibly have believed the election was stolen. Mike Kelly, I mean, had plenty of evidence from which to come to that conclusion. Plus, he had plenty of things that were held back. That would, like I'm telling you, the ballots in Pennsylvania. It just so happened that in the 5 states where they stopped the balloting, counting, he was ahead, and he lost all 5. The odds don't kind of come out that way usually. It also happens that in each one of those 5, the key place was a crooked Democratic city that was involved. So it was as if the Democrats selected where they were going to do it pretty damn carefully. I mean, you can tell somebody else this. You're not going to tell me that Philadelphia isn't corrupt, that Detroit's not corrupt, that Atlanta's not corrupt. Right? Go tell that to some jerk, you know?
All right. Well, Mr. Mayor, we deeply respect and honor what you did on September 11th. I mean, we've been doing an entire show on the response, and that must have been the single hardest thing for any mayor to ever go through. And it is profound. In looking at it through the lens of history, it seems just like a country many, many, many years. You know, it seems like a different country, quite frankly. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you for walking out on the ceremony today. I suppose that's breaking some news. I didn't know that you and Bernard Kerik walked out on the official ceremony. Any parting thoughts on how Americans should remember this day?
Yeah, we should remember it for the ability of all Americans to come together and put America first, and not politics. You know, I'll give you an example. I do not understand how the members of the Biden cabinet sit there and watch him act as president every day and justify their being loyal Americans. The man is not mentally competent to carry out the office of president of the United States. It is so obvious. He gets off the stage, he doesn't know where he's walking. Being president of the United States, unbelievable responsibility. We've got a man who has a serious case of dementia that is displayed every single day, covered up every single day. The people in this administration have to know it. So their desire to maintain power, for whatever reason, overcomes their patriotism. That's very, very sad, because I wish, if I were ever in that position, I mean, I worked for two presidents, Ford and Reagan. If I believed that, I would do something about it. Under the 25th Amendment, I'd almost feel like it was my obligation. My country is more important than my loyalty to any president. Even my good friend Donald Trump.
Yes.
And if I saw that, I would feel I have to do something. I don't understand, out of 20 or 30 of these people, there isn't even one that wants this to be questioned, his competence to be questioned. It's frightening to me. I think the country was different back in 2001. I think the country came first.
Yes.
Everybody put aside being Democrats or Republicans. We put the country first. And if, God forbid, somebody was incompetent, we'd have all been willing to remove them.
Yes.
So yes. That's where I am very, very troubled. And I shouldn't say that I walked out on the ceremony like in a huff or anything like that. I had to leave pretty early anyway. But I was I would have to say, more than I walked out, I was pretty uncomfortable there. So the fact that I had to leave early was a lot easier for me and for Bernie.
Yeah, I truly could not imagine. Mr. Mayor, thank you so very much for being on the program. What an important day, and what important insights from the man in the arena, the man who was there himself. And please, ladies and gentlemen, follow Rudy, support him in his fight against this tyranny state, and ensure that we will be victorious as we march forward to that America First that Rudy just spoke about. America First, that is what we felt in the aftermath of September 11th. That's what September 12th was about, like putting the country first. It'd be nice to get that again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to give, obviously, the mayor it was a much longer show than we normally do, but we wanted to give the mayor a chance to talk today of all days. He was coming from what he just said there, multiple events and multiple ceremonies, so we're honored to have had him join our program. He was talking a lot about Donald Trump, obviously somebody who he deeply respects, and somebody who had a deeply respectful weekend himself. Donald Trump was in Iowa at the Super Bowl of Iowa, the Iowa-Iowa State game, and was having one heck of a time. Rudy Giuliani just said that Joe Biden has dementia. Joe Biden does, in fact, look very much like the crypt keeper inside of a coffin that opens up once a day, and he gets trotted out, put back in the coffin. Donald Trump, on the other hand, was having the time of his life this weekend, grilling hamburgers, throwing footballs, and being welcomed like a conquering hero to frat parties, along with an entire stadium of people. Check this out. ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump seems to be having the time of his life and seems to be stronger than ever. Polling shows that. We'll see what happens. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. 2024 will be there for you, and we will always keep our eyes trained on what truly matters with our verse of the day from Isaiah 41. For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you. Whew. There's a lot of evil in the world, and it is inexplicable to see what happened on September 11th, 22 years ago, and to watch the subsequent lies and the abuses of power afterwards by our government, and to sometimes become hopeless, to take the black pill. And we say, no, don't do it. Step back from the edge. Like, know that God is God. Fear God more than you fear evil. God will take hold of your hand and say, do not fear, I will help you. If you believe the scriptures and if you believe God's word, then let everything else dissolve around you, let everything else fade away, and focus simply on that. That should be your North Star. God, family, country. That's what we do on this program. My name is Benny Johnson, and this is The Benny Show. See ya.